a book about how congregations respond to difficult times and then get suggestions for themes and liturgical resources. But it's also a book about how leaders and pastors can manage themselves in difficult times. And, you know, Stilling the Storm, the whole story. And I did a chapel talk on that recently about, you know, how we kind of wish Jesus would join us in our anxieties when these things are going wrong. And he was just kind of calm about it and stilled the storm and was there. And so the encouragement is to trust him and stay calm and carry your congregation through it. And the thesis is really that worship is one of the best ways both to process these difficult things and the best way to get to healing as a congregation.
Thank you. And Reggie, a year ago, September, I had the privilege of hearing your wife participate on a panel for the Soul Care Retreat. Yeah. And it was in the middle of, I hope, some of the worst times in your life, because I hope you don't have more worst times. But she was talking about what was happening in your neighborhood and the discernment process of staying there. And she was kind of going in one direction, you in another. You did stay, because I just saw her at the last retreat and asked her what happened. And so I would like you to talk about the discernment process for you and your family for your call to ministry. You might just update them on what happened briefly there and share what that was like.
Okay, yeah. A couple of years ago, there was a drive-by shooting in our neighborhood, and the bullets hit our house and our next door neighbor, because the gang members were trying to assassinate, well, they were just trying to shoot. I don't know if that's an assassination if you're a gangbanger, but they were trying to shoot him. And they missed him and grazed him, and then some of the bullets hit our home. That caused a great amount of anxiety to come out of your house, and your house got the yellow tape and police cars and people from your church who are wondering what is going on here and why this is going on. And for my wife, it was a very troubling time, because she was asking the question, should we stay? And so were her parents, who live in Hudsonville, and saying, y'all can come out here and live. Yeah, let's go to Hootersville. We had to decide, and yes, I had to decide, and we had to decide, should we stay? We had moved there 2 years ago, and I am president of the neighborhood association, and we were trying to stabilize our church, our street, just for this thing. And we had our girls live in the basement, and we took a vow of stability. And God really just solidified our own calling and said, you know what? I've called you to be there, and the safest place that you can be is where I call you to be. That doesn't mean that it's going to be safe. That doesn't mean that God is going to not allow you to suffer. It does not mean that things are going to get better quickly. All it means is that God will be present where he has placed you. And here's the other thing. If we would have left, then my neighbors across the street would have left. My two neighbors who were afraid for their own lives would have left. We would have left the street to the gangbangers to take it over. And we said, no, we will not allow evil to take over our street. God is in this place. God has called us here, and this is where we will stay. It was then that a few weeks later, a couple more people moved onto our street, 2 who were members of our church, when even a majority of our church members were saying, we need to move you out of there, Pastor. And we said, no, we need to stay here, because this is where God has called us. If God has called you to a particular place, then that's where you stay. Because maybe it is by your staying, taking a vow of stability, that you will encourage others to gain courage. And very often in urban ministry, we need some courageous people to not allow the evil to take over. Then what do we say about Christ? And so, are those neighbors still there? Yes, they're still there. But you know what? If God is for us, you finish the sentence, who?
And when I asked your wife for an update, she told me this one little story, which I hope you'll tell, which is about a cake and a neighbor.
Beware of children. They will teach you much. My daughter my oldest daughter wanted to bring peace to our neighbors. And she asked my wife to make a cake. And my wife asked her, well, why do you want to make this cake? I want to take it to my neighbors. My wife said, what? She said, I want to take it to my neighbors to show them the love of Jesus. My wife rolled her eyes and said, okay, we're going to just do this. And she walked over, and they did the cake, and they walked it over to our neighbors. Same guy who was shot at. And my daughter handed him the cake, and she said, this is for you, because Jesus loves you. He was speechless. He didn't say a thing. For 5 minutes, his mouth was wide open. Flies were coming in and out. It was a sight to see. Nobody had ever did something without expecting anything in return. It was then that my daughter taught us that maybe the best line of defense is simple hospitality. By bringing over a cake to someone to your enemy. And they took the cake into the house and never said a word. And they've been somewhat nice to us, but that's still kind of a work in progress. But that was my daughter teaching us about community.
Thank you. Great story. And my last question goes to you, Kathy. You mentioned that when you realized the call to ministry, it opened up new conversations with your father. I know there's some people here whose dads are in ministry, and I'm sure that's an interesting relationship. I just wonder if you would speak to what you've learned from your dad and what your dad has learned from you in ministry.
Well, I can't speak for him, but you got to understand that growing up in the parsonage, I did not like it at all. And I was, of all my siblings, the least likely to follow in Dad's footsteps, and everybody knew it. And so part of it, I had to eat a lot of words when I went to seminary with my sisters and everything. But it totally changed things because, well, for one thing, when I went to see my parents and said, I'm going to go to seminary, and they knew I was sort of taking classes, but when I made the decision, MDiv and all that, they were so excited and so affirming, and kind of surprised me. But it was really cool. My dad, I think, went through seminary all over again vicariously through me. And we had conversations about sermons that I was working on and things that he recalled preaching about. And, so many times I would hang up the phone and think, man, I sure never thought I'd have a conversation like that with my dad. But it brought us really, really close. And especially now, my mom died a few years ago, and I'm the only one who lives in town here. So we've gotten really close. And that shared calling thing it's been a beautiful thing. I've learned a lot from it, and it, I think, was the mechanism that brought some healing into a relationship that, it wasn't as good as it could have been.
Thank you. And Reggie, I wondered if you would just say a word about your class and the importance of having it be on site.
I'm teaching a class on urban ministry, and I think that I'm doing the class on site at my church because I think that you have to be in the place and feeling it, touching it, smelling it. I want you to come to my neighborhood where it's if you want real, authentic Mexican food, it's the bomb in my neighborhood. Is where you come, and where you can get a sense and feel of the geography. Geography and theology are connected together, and so you will meet a lot of people. There are a lot of challenges, but hey, we'll have some fun too. So I think that's why I have it on site, because I wanted once that there will be a class at Calvin where I can be off site and I can do some different things. You know what I'm saying? You know, do some different things.
Good. Thank you. Now I'm going to open it up to you. Hope you have questions for either one of these people about anything. Discernment, calling, whatever. Who'd like to be first? Steve.
What do you say? What would you say to those of us who view our call as something 3 years from now and are frustrated with not being able to, I guess, go live out the call right now because we've got 3 years of boring work to do?
Well, did you consider that maybe God's call right now is to do this boring work, as you put it? I mean, I guess I wouldn't, maybe it's because the calling came to me more while I was in seminary, but I wouldn't think of this as sort of a hiatus until you get to the real call. I mean, I think everything you're learning right now, and goodness, you're in a community of people here, and people who need friendship and ministry and all of that. I mean, it seems to me there's all kinds of ways you can be developing as a pastor right here at seminary through what you're learning and how you talk about that and in your group. And so I guess I would challenge the idea that the call is 3 years away. I think the call is right here. But if it's shaping slowly, that's fine. I mean, we can be relaxed about that too.
I'm glad you're frustrated, because frustration is the place where God is learning to prune you and shape you for the place that you don't think that you're going to be. Like I said, a lot of this stuff, you're like squirrels now. You're gathering all these nuts, and you're stacking them away, and you got all this stuff in your jaws, and you're thinking, man, I'm going to enjoy this right now. Hold on there, partner, hold on. You're going to get to it. But it won't make sense to you right now. It's not supposed to make sense to you right now. Why? Because the questions that you think the church is going to be asking you are not going to happen until after your 5th or 7th year of pastoring. Why? Because as they would say in the hood, you ain't got no street cred yet. That means when you go into a pastorate, people are saying this: you ain't got nothing to teach me, but I got everything to teach you. It's not until you become part of that community that you begin to get that credibility, that people will allow you to come into their lives and then to begin to speak into their lives. So frustration, that's all right. Be frustrated. But God is pruning you and moving you to the place where you will be useful. And I think the most healthiest thing that we can do is to be useful in the kingdom at the right time. God's still working on it. The right time is coming. Then you'll come back and ask all those big questions. Open up your bird call, because I didn't open my mind for 10 years after I got out, so it was healthy.
Thank you.
We've been talking about your specific calling, so I'm kind of curious more. Reggie, you talked a little bit about it with the neighborhood and you and your wife discerning your calling to stay there. So I'm kind of curious about your family sense of calling to where you're at. Because, I mean, I can sit here and say, I feel called to this ministry, but my wife, you know, she's got to be along. I'm not just going to drag her around. So I'm kind of curious as to the family dynamic